Alright, so for this look at straight-to-video sequels, we're going to be doing two this time, and that's going to be kind of a recurring thing when we do this also. And because some of them went on and on forever, but sometimes we'll touch on these ones that have a couple, rather than just the one. And now let's go into From Dusk Till Dawn, which, just briefly on the first one, which we've talked about before on here. Just who doesn't love From Dusk Till Dawn? It's the dream team of Tarantino and Rodriguez, but it's one of those cases where it's not necessarily, even though Rodriguez is the director and Tarantino is the writer, it's still this case of the movie is equally so Tarantino and so Rodriguez. And some people can say, like, it's kind of split in half, where the first half is the Tarantino half, the second half is the Rodriguez half. I feel like both of them are constantly visible, as far as the writing and directing goes. And obviously it's very famous for that sort of twist in the middle where many people go into this not knowing it's a vampire movie, and you can't tell until it happens. And I was even one of those people that had the pleasure of that experience like 2 decades ago when I rented it from the video store, where I could have sworn it was a vampire movie, but as the movie continued, I talked myself out of it. I was like, oh, it must be a different movie I'm thinking of, but this one's awesome, so let's see what happens. And then it was, oh good, I'm not crazy. I wasn't imagining this is totally the vampire movie I thought I had heard about. So, and I can't even tell you how many times I've seen this at this point, but I love it. It's this fantastic, fun, funny gore fest, and just endlessly creative as they transform into different forms, and it's a classic in its own right. So, needless to say, not to mention, by the way, that Tarantino had just won an Oscar for writing probably the greatest movie of all time, and then it was like, oh, by the way, here's this vampire movie I wrote, and that coming right after that also is fantastic. So yeah, going into these, first of all, the trick to having not just one but two sequels to a movie that's famous for having a big-ass twist in the middle, there's going to be an element that's going to be missing from these. So right away they have the obstacle of being what we know they're going to be without that surprise element and seeing what they can do with it. I guess I should go ahead and mention here, there is also, I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably know this, of course, there was also a TV series that went for like 3 seasons. As much as Tarantino and this whole world, how I'm just all about that, how he's literally my favorite director, I'm not much of a TV person, so this is something that was never really on my radar. Like, I only even vaguely know that I had to look up to see how many seasons there were so I could say that just now. I'm not sure exactly what all that went into, but these two movies are going to be what we're really talking about here. So, to start with the first sequel, which is subtitled Texas Blood Money, which I feel like I rented from the same video store not too long after I saw the original movie, and needless to say, like I said, on top of the surprise element of the original movie being gone, there's a lot it has to live up to as far as how big it went and how effects heavy it got, because Rodriguez is one of those directors that his whole thing is making things feel massive with just the most minimal means. And like the fact that, still one of my favorite things about any director is the fact that he edits his movies in his garage. And that he makes these movies that feel huge, and when you see the making of, or you hear about it, or you hear him talk about it, it was so small, and he just made it into this spectacle. So when you're looking at the constraints that these movies are under, it really comes through in the second movie more. That's something that it seemed to struggle to come out of, because we start with this opening scene. It's a decent opening scene where it kind of feels like a horror movie maybe from like the 80s era, and it's Bruce Campbell and Tiffany Thiessen getting on an elevator, and they are attacked by a swarm of bats. And it's like, in the fact that we learn that this is a movie within the movie, it feels very appropriate. And it's like it feels like a movie of a certain time in this really nice way. But when you look at this scene when they're this very chaotic scene where they're attacked by bats, it's something you kind of have to get used to because we kind of go all in on the bats thing. Rather than, I mean, there's vampires here, there's people in makeup here, but not near to the degree of the original movie. There's just a lot of bats, and that's where a lot of the attacks come from. So before that, obviously, if you're going to be a From Dusk Till Dawn movie, you have to have a much more grounded thing going on before your vampires really kick in. So this one takes the same approach. It's another crime movie. And we start off with this sort of cop-criminal rivalry with Robert Patrick and Bo Hawkins, two people who I love, who also like specialize in these kind of parts. It feels like, and this is something that they established at the beginning that I really feel like the movie could have done a lot more with. And certainly if they wanted to go more of they do try to sort of duplicate Tarantino dialogue throughout it, and this relationship between them especially is something where if you really wanted to dive in and try to do a Tarantino kind of thing, you could have done real magic with these two. But the Bo Hawkins character, who's very intriguing because Hawkins was such an intriguing actor, that he just seems to sort of fall off the movie for long periods of time when they could have really done something with this, but it becomes pretty generic pretty quickly as far as what the crime aspect of it is. I guess it's worth noting before we go on, the director of this one is Scott Spiegel, who might not be a name that rings a lot of bells in most people, but he's this extremely crucial behind the scenes person. He came up in that group with like Raimi and the Coen brothers and stuff like that. And to my understanding, he's the one that introduced Tarantino and Lawrence Bender, thus changing movies forever. So the guy's a pretty big deal, even if you don't recognize his name right away. And here, like I said, it's just really this task of trying to recreate the magic of what that first movie was, and with really anybody, that was going to be really hard. Like, it was almost destined to be underwhelming to try to continue this, which is really interesting since the pitches for these two movies came pretty much directly from Tarantino and Rodriguez. Tarantino and Bender and Spiegel for this one, and Rodriguez and his cousin who ended up writing The Hangman's Daughter, did the third one, or did the concept for the third one. So it was, I don't know. Like I said, it really felt like it's like the one movie where it's like, how can you really even follow up what you captured with that? It's because when you look at it and you see it sort of trying to be flashy in its own way, like to kind of have its own identity. So you have a lot of strange point of view shots. For instance, we get like an oscillating fan shot where it follows the characters on top of a fan, literally. There's the point of view of a hat brim at one point. There's the when everything's reflected in the bloody bathtub. There's like a couple of inside a vampire's mouth shots, like the Little Shop of Horrors shot, I guess. And you can sense like it's great that it's kind of trying to have its own visual identity, but yeah, because I wouldn't say Rodriguez is a director that has like a sort of visual trademark. It's more of just like his vibe and his over-the-top action, and like I said, just using small means to make something big. But yeah, it feels like a lot of showiness that's pretty empty as far as that goes. So as far as like other characters, we've got a whole group here as far as the criminals go, like Brad Harrelson, who's the brother of Woody Harrelson, is in there. Raymond Cruz is in there. But another person that's here is James Parks as Edgar McGraw, who is the son. He was son number one in Kill Bill, and he's here playing that role again. And it's interesting when you look back on where Earl McGraw, the Michael Parks character, has shown up in Tarantino's universe, remembering the fact that he's actually a character that was killed in the very first scene he was in, which is the opening scene of the first From Dusk Till Dawn. So we have his character here sort of wanting to avenge his father's death. Like I said, before they even showed up in his bigger movies like Kill Bill and stuff like that, and Death Proof. Um, so all the connections are still here in a really fun way. It still feels like we're sort of in the universe a little bit. Though, like I said, there are attempts to capture, like, Tarantino dialogue. Like, when they're all sitting in the motel room and they're watching porn. And, there's dialogue from this. Like, when they're talking about, like, the story in porn, or if it's, whatever. And you can tell that's when they're kind of trying to capture that. And then when they do, like, the story within the story, where Cruz tells this story about the guy that goes into the porn shoot with the shotgun, sort of feels like it's trying to do the layered thing, like when Mr. Orange tells the story in Reservoir Dogs, where it's like the story within the story within the story, and it just goes on. But it's all very surface level, despite that. It also feels like when you talk about the constraints, when they're actually at the titty twister, it feels like the set feels significantly smaller. Like, it feels very sort of confined when you think about how massive that set was in the original movie. And when you look at effects also, like I said, they really go all in on the bats, and it does feel like there's moments here where I feel like I remember very few actual vampire transformations in this second movie. And it's like, and when we do get to those moments, there's like the shower kill, for instance, where there's a lot of clearly almost distractingly intentional psycho recreated shots. And then this shot where a bat comes in and attacks her, and we see her, like, come back at one point, but there's never something like it felt like every time a character we'd been introduced to turned in the original movie, it was almost like an event, like when Tom Savini turns, or when Fred Williamson turns, or whoever it is, Richie. But here it's usually side characters we barely knew, and like I said, it's just it feels so much smaller and constrained. And it's like I said, if you're coming off of Rodriguez, you would expect that they'd know how to really use the constraints and make it feel big, because that's Rodriguez's whole thing. But it's really weighed down by that most of the time. And especially when it gets to the point where it's trying... Because the thing about the original movie was that it was the crime movie, and then it was the vampire movie, and that was the structure. This one, I suppose you could say it's ambitious, where, because the surprise element is gone, it seems to try to push through the carnage of the vampire movie and keep being the crime movie. That's an interesting approach, and I can see it working if it was a better sort of structured movie, and the characters and the story was more engaging. But it's just like these things that you can notice as a concept, and then it doesn't really get much deeper than that. So there's that. And then we get to the point where it is, we have this climax set during an eclipse, which for a vampire movie is another really interesting idea. And it does sort of come to life in a way during these final moments, but at the end of the day, it is just very underwhelming and totally unmemorable, pretty much. So that's like when I saw this shortly after I saw the original movie back when I was getting moved from the video store, I didn't see this again until like relatively recently, and I didn't really remember anything at all. So I didn't even remember that James Parks was in it, and that they had the whole him trying to avenge McGraw's death from the first movie. So yeah, there's a lot of really good ideas in it. Like I said, if you had like an actual Tarantino script, it probably could have been something really cool. Because even moments that could have been big moments feel downplayed through different choices, like when Ray Bob, the Harrelson character, I believe, turns. When I was talking about how it's usually a big dramatic moment when they turn in the original movie, there is a moment here when he turns, but we already saw the moment where he got bit, and the problem is that they play up the scene like there's a surprise factor to the fact that he has turned. Because it's like, he's like the one left, and it's like, okay, just we need you to get over here, we need you to get away from this, and then it's like, oh, he's one of them, and it's like, I feel like there would have been more of a surprise factor there if we hadn't just seen him get bit in like the previous scene. So, like I said, there's always almost something really cool and great going on in this movie, but none of those moments seem to kind of come to fruition. So that's kind of unfortunate, but it's a really good attempt, I guess, and you can see where like Tarantino and Bender, like the idea comes from them initially. But as far as it's pulled off, it's kind of a letdown. But to go to the third movie, um, another one that's just it's the third. While there's always seemingly something going on in the second movie, the third movie feels like it has a lot going on, but also feels totally uneventful for a lot of the time too. So that's an interesting feel to go with. Interestingly enough, we're changing directors now to PJ Pesce, I believe his name is. He did a western, like a TV movie western called The Desperate Trail with Sam Elliott, and that's what got him this job. And this isn't the last time we're going to talk about him actually when we do these. So we're going for the western vibe, and we're going back, and it is a prequel to the first movie. It's set in like the early 1900s, like maybe the 1910s area. And so we have an interesting character we start with. It's Michael Parks, again, not playing Earl McGraw. He's playing a real person. Ambrose Bierce, the writer that disappeared in like his 70s. He just like went off and nobody ever saw him again. So they play with that, and it's like, okay, so where did that dude end up? In this, we have a storyline where he wants to join Pancho Villa's gang for a reason I don't remember, but it's not really important anyway. It's just kind of a MacGuffin plot to get him to the vampires, essentially. So, and there's a lot of characters in this one, a lot of actors we'll probably recognize. Like I said, a lot of moving pieces in this one. We have this sort of outlaw character that's named Johnny Madrid, which is really funny given the Lancer character's name, who we were shown in a more mainstream way in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino movie, obviously. And his sort of kidnapped love interest, Esmeralda, who is the title character, the Hangman's daughter. The Hangman himself, yes, Star Wars fans, that is who you think it is. And like there's a Western sort of old-fashioned journey, and they're on the run, and that's what it for like an hour. That's basically what it is. And then we have Jordana Spiro, who's a director now, and she's pretty unrecognizable in this, as a character that always seems like she's going to be more important than she actually is. Where it's like every time we get a moment where it's like, oh, this character's kind of an interesting wild card that kind of feels like she's kind of on both sides of what's going on here. But the character's just like always underutilized. So that's unfortunate. We've got Rebecca Gayheart here with her husband. They're a newlywed couple, and their name is Newly. And I guess they're here to kind of they're like this very Christian based couple. So I'm guessing they're here to bring back the religious themes that the Harvey Keitel character brought us in the original movie. Those kind of come into play, I guess, not near as effectively as in the first movie, but it's there. And they meet Orlando Jones at the when they get to the bar, which isn't quite a bar at the time. In this, it's more like a hotel brothel kind of situation. And it's not called the Titty Twister, obviously, in the 1910s or whatever. But yes, when they do get there, Danny Trejo is still here, still that character. I feel like he had a different name in the second movie, which would make sense since I'm pretty sure he's killed in the original movie. But he's the character in the third movie that he is in the first movie, I believe. So that would make sense. And we have another character that's like the big bad vampire, who is Sonia Braga, who's a really cool casting choice. I really like this character, even though she's introduced so fucking late. But still, there is some sort of effect of that. I feel like that's a little bit of a Western trope where you have characters that are like big bad characters that are introduced pretty late in. So that could be kind of an ode to that, I guess. And yeah, that's basically what we're looking at. It's basically an hour of it being your interest wanes in and out Western. I like the idea of the original setup being, oh, it's one half crime movie, one half vampire movie. It is a cool idea to have, well, let's take that concept but make it one half Western, one half vampire movie. But what I was just saying was that the crime, like if From Dusk Till Dawn, the original movie, had stayed the crime movie, there's a good chance it would have still been a pretty awesome movie. This Western that's going on for 2/3 of the movie, not half, 2/3 of the movie, there's not a lot to it really feels like we're just killing time until it's a vampire movie. It made me miss the concept of the second movie where it was like, let's try to be both simultaneously. But that's, even if it feels like that sort of betrays the concept, still, like I said, coming from the idea of, now that we don't have the element of surprise, we have to change it up, that seems like a good idea now when you see, oh, let's try to wait longer for the vampires even though we know they're coming. And to make an underwhelming Western at that, to get to that point. Again, it all comes back to, it's good ideas, but you needed something more interesting. You needed better writing, more intriguing characters, all the stuff. You needed all the stuff that makes movies good when they are. So yeah, we do get like bursts of gore that remind us that we're going to be in a horror movie. Like when the shootout's going on and the driver's head explodes. Like there's moments like that where it's like, yeah, if they had thrown that in, like if they had made a really over-the-top Western for an hour like that, like when Raimi did The Quick and the Dead, when, like, you know, somebody would get a headshot and their entire body would fly away. Something like that. That would have been very Tarantino-esque, too. But, yeah, like I said, this one has a lot more of the Rodriguez fingerprints on it, because of the two different pitches that were going on between these two movies. But, yeah, there's also the bar fight that ends up leading to it, much like the first movie. Where there's like some gore in there before it's like, and then it kind of gradually becomes, oh, now that there's visible blood, the vampires are going to start coming out. So, and of course, it's all leading up to the big reveal. Like, the whole movie's purpose, the whole movie's purpose for being is to reveal eventually that Esmeralda is Santanic of Pandemonium. That's basically the whole reason the movie exists, I think. So, But while we're getting to that point, it does start to take it up quite a bit. Like, it does feel more vampire focused and not bat focused like the second movie was. It really picks that up, where it's like actors that are actually there. When it first starts, it does look like people are more in masks than they are makeup, but as it goes on, it gets better. And the way that it sort of, it's a straight-to-video movie, so the CGI is not exactly going to be completely top-notch, but you can see the combination where it was like, oh, we'll have a practical effect here, and then we'll, like, transition to CGI, or the other way around. And so, like, kind of do a Jurassic Park sort of thing. But, I mean, it's very, very obvious when it's practical and when it's not. There's not much of a blending going on. But when you see the practical stuff, like when, like, tentacles or whatever they are come out of Rebecca Gayheart, or the Cobra head, there's like a second where this Cobra vampire is like an actual practical thing. It's like, look closely, you can see the shot where it's an actual thing that's actually there. And then shitty CGI takes over. But anytime you see those practical effects, even if they're there for a second, you really appreciate them. So there's that. And we're talking like 1999, 2000, so maybe I shouldn't hate on the CGI too much, because once again, we are working on like a straight-to-video budget, so the last act of this movie is a significant improvement on both its own movie and the second movie as a whole. It comes to a strong finish. It comes to the finish that you want a sequel from Dusk Till Dawn to be, even though it is following the formula of the first movie a lot closer than the second movie. So it's like, if it's one of those things where you want it to feel the same but also be kind of different, then that you're basically getting what you would want. But and we get stuff like when, obviously, since we're setting up Gayheart especially as this, very sort of Christian conservative character, we're going to have those changing moments. Like when she has it goes into this whole almost Guillermo del Toro sequence where she has this like very un-Christian seductive dance with Orlando Jones that feels kind of out of nowhere, but it's like when we had the transition, like the dilemmas that the Harvey Keitel character was having, internally and externally, about his religion and where he stood and what was going on in that movie. This one, it feels a bit more of a blatant approach to do that, but then again, it's not like these are subtle movies, so I can't fault it for that. But, there's big... I was talking about how small the bar felt in the second movie. These feel like bigger and better sets. And it just feels like they really went... Like, maybe that's why the first hour is so underwhelming, because, like, all of the budget, like, all the damn budget went into, like, the last half hour. And so with that, it's like, well, if you were gonna finally do something satisfying, doing it on the way out is the best place to do it if you were only gonna pick one place. So... it has that going for it. So that's... And then, we get to this gnarly finish with the grandmother, which is a wild design, a disgusting design, where they cut her open and the bats fly out. That's a good use of the bats. When they cut the grandmother open and a horde of them comes out. So that... And there's the castration moment that feels like it could have been a moment in the original movie where he kicks the vampire in the balls, forgetting that the blade he has in his boot is still projecting out. That feels like prime the original movie. So that was a good call. Like, it feels silly at first when he kicks a vampire in the balls and he does like the reaction shot, but then when you see the accidental castration that's happened, it's like, oh, that's pretty good. So, and I guess feels in line with something that would have been in the original movie. So I can work with that. So, yeah. What it all comes down to is, as far as making something that recaptures the first movie, we've got about a half an hour worth in 3 hours of movie here. So, that's that's basically what they are. Like I said, pretty underwhelming, especially when you think about how great the first movie is. Like I said, I think I've seen The Hangman's Daughter once or twice, and I can't even remember for sure. Um, and I have seen Texas Blood Money twice, very far apart. Um, like I said at the beginning, I can't tell you how many times I've seen the original movie, but it's a lot. It's a fucking lot. So that's how I feel about these. So we're gonna continue doing the straight to video. I believe the next one we're gonna do actually is another one where it's a 2 and 3. So and they're worse than these. These are about to look really good when we talk about those next two. So there's that. And then in between, we're gonna do more stuff like Stephen King stuff and franchise stuff and all of that. The usual October stuff from us. So until the next thing, I think that's it.